For over 50 years, Ron Howard has stood as an unwavering pillar in the ever-shifting sands of Hollywood, a constant, comforting presence that has charmed generations. From his iconic portrayal of Opie Taylor, the freckle-faced, earnest son in the idyllic landscape of Mayberry, to his breakthrough role as the lovable Richie Cunningham in the nostalgic glow of Happy Days, he embodied the quintessential all-American boy next door. His smile was genuine, his demeanor humble, and his on-screen persona radiated an authenticity that audiences found immediately endearing and utterly trustworthy. He was, quite simply, America's sweetheart, a rare child star who not only survived the notoriously harsh spotlight, but seemed to blossom under its gaze, transitioning seamlessly into a universally respected and acclaimed director. This image of the wholesome, dependable talent only deepened with his remarkable career behind the camera. Think of cinematic triumphs like Apollo 13, a masterpiece of human resilience, or A Beautiful Mind, a poignant exploration of genius and mental health. With each success, Ron Howard's reputation as Hollywood's good guy solidified. He was the quiet, steady hand, the director who always seemed to deliver, whose projects often garnered both critical praise and widespread popular appeal. Beyond his professional accolades, his personal life appeared equally blessed and remarkably stable. A decades-long marriage, a loving family, and an absence of scandal further cemented his public perception as an almost impossibly perfect figure in an industry often defined by its dramatic personal struggles and public falls from grace. He wasn't just a director. He was a symbol of sustained integrity and wholesome success. But what if the narrative we've all embraced for half a century, the one of unyielding perfection and effortless grace, was merely a carefully constructed facade? What if, beneath that beaming smile and the myriad accolades, lay shadows and unseen battles that have been meticulously hidden from public view for decades? The truth, as Ron Howard himself has recently begun to reveal in a series of candid and deeply personal admissions, is far more complex, far more human, and frankly, far more devastating than any of us could have imagined. The man we thought we knew, the epitome of the Hollywood dream, has finally peeled back the layers, exposing the raw, uncomfortable realities of profound struggles he faced in silence, far from the cameras and the public eye. He's opened up about a devastating choice he made back in 1991, a decision that has haunted him for over 3 decades, casting a long, dark shadow over what many assumed was a golden period in his life and career. He's spoken with heartbreaking honesty about nearly losing a beloved family member to the insidious clutches of addiction, a private torment he endured while publicly celebrating some of his greatest professional triumphs. And he's recounted a terrifying, pivotal moment on set, a physical collapse that forced him to confront his own fragility and the immense, crushing pressure he was under, revealing a vulnerability that directly contradicts his long-held image of unflappable strength. These aren't just anecdotes. These are deeply personal confessions that rewrite the script of Ron Howard's life, revealing a man who, like all of us, has grappled with immense pain, profound regret, and moments of sheer desperation. His willingness to finally share what really happened during those mysterious missing months will undoubtedly shock you and ultimately break your heart. Prepare yourselves, because the Ron Howard you thought you knew is about to be profoundly redefined. His life appeared to be a meticulously crafted narrative of success, stability, and an almost serene lack of personal drama. He was the steady hand, the unflappable presence, the man whose worst perceived flaw might have been an overly enthusiastic attachment to his signature baseball cap. We, the public, have comfortably settled into this perception, perhaps even needing it, a beacon of normalcy in an often chaotic world. But now, something has fundamentally shifted. In a recent, remarkably candid interview, Ron Howard chose to dismantle pieces of this carefully constructed 5-decade-old edifice. This wasn't a casual chat on a talk show couch or a fleeting soundbite on a red carpet. This was a deep, probing, sit-down conversation, the kind that respected journalists orchestrate to truly delve into the inner workings of a public figure's life. Picture an intimate setting, perhaps dimly lit, where the usual guardrails of celebrity interviews were lowered, replaced by an atmosphere conducive to genuine reflection and profound revelation. The interviewer, known for their ability to coax truths from even the most private individuals, guided the conversation with a gentle yet persistent hand, allowing Ron the space and time to articulate experiences he had seemingly kept locked away for decades. It's natural to wonder, why now? What prompted this sudden, stark departure from his established public persona? At 70 years old, Ron Howard has reached a point in life where introspection often takes precedence. There's a natural inclination to reflect on one's legacy, to reconcile past choices with present understanding, and perhaps to shed the burdens of long-held secrets. It could be a desire for authenticity, a need to present a more complete, more human version of himself before the final chapters of his story are written. Perhaps he felt a compelling urge to control his own narrative, to preemptively address potential future disclosures, or simply to unburden himself of the emotional weight that such profound experiences can carry when kept hidden. In an age where vulnerability is increasingly valued, even from our most stoic icons, Ron Howard seems to have decided that the time for perfect veneers has passed, and the time for raw, unvarnished truth has arrived. The initial moments of the interview were subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in his demeanor. He wasn't overtly emotional or sensationalist. Instead, there was a quiet intensity, a deliberate pause before answering certain questions, a depth in his gaze that hinted at unspoken complexities. It wasn't the usual anecdotal storytelling of Hollywood successes. It was something far more personal. He began to speak not just of filmmaking, but of the impact of filmmaking on his personal life, the sacrifices made, the silent battles fought while the cameras rolled and the accolades poured in. He spoke of the illusion of perfection, of the public's unwavering belief in his unwavering happiness, and how that perception, while flattering, often masked a far more intricate and sometimes painful reality. He wasn't dropping bombshells immediately, but rather carefully, almost tenderly, peeling back the layers. It was less an explosion of truth and more a gradual unveiling, like watching a sculptor reveal a hidden form from a block of marble. Each anecdote, each carefully chosen word, wasn't just a story. It was an admission, a crack forming in the polished facade. He spoke of moments where the pressure became almost unbearable, of the silent internal dialogues he carried, of the choices made that, while perhaps necessary at the time, left indelible marks on his soul. This wasn't about seeking sympathy. It was about sharing experience, about acknowledging that even the most blessed lives are not immune to profound struggle. This shift in his public persona is nothing short of revolutionary for someone who has maintained such a consistent, carefully guarded image for so long. For decades, he was the stable anchor, the one who navigated Hollywood's treacherous waters with an enviable grace. Now, he's inviting us behind the curtain, not just to see the mechanics of his success, but to witness the internal landscape of his personal battles. This initial disclosure, this willingness to scratch at the surface of his own carefully curated privacy, serves as a powerful preamble. It prepares us, the audience, for something far deeper, far more resonant than mere celebrity gossip. It signals that what is to come is not just information, but profound confession. Revelations that will undoubtedly challenge our long-held perceptions and paint a more complex, undeniably human portrait of the man we thought we knew so well. He is laying the groundwork, clearing the stage for the devastating truths he is finally ready to share. Truths that promise to reshape how we view Ron Howard, the man, beyond the enduring legend. By 1991, Ron Howard was not just a successful director, he was a phenomenon, a living testament to the American dream. From the charming, freckle-faced Opie Taylor to the wholesome Richie Cunningham, his public image was meticulously crafted, almost impossibly perfect. He was the all-American boy next door who had seamlessly transitioned from beloved actor to respected filmmaker, proving his mettle with hits like Splash and Cocoon. The release of Backdraft that year was poised to cement his status, a high-octane spectacle promising to propel him into the elite echelons of Hollywood's action directors. The world saw a man at the peak of his powers, radiating confidence and quiet integrity. His smile an ever-present symbol of his unwavering success and seemingly unblemished personal life. But beneath that reassuring veneer, behind those earnest blue eyes, a shadow was beginning to lengthen, cast by a choice made in the crucible of that very year. A decision so profound and so deeply personal that it would quietly reshape the trajectory of his existence, leaving an indelible mark on his conscience for decades to come. The year 1991 was, for Ron Howard, a maelstrom of professional demands and personal anxieties. He was immersed in the colossal undertaking of bringing Backdraft to the screen. This wasn't just another film. It was a blockbuster, a high-stakes gamble, with a massive budget and the weight of Universal Pictures' expectations resting squarely on his shoulders. The days bled into nights, a relentless cycle of production meetings, script rewrites, on-set crises, and the meticulous crafting of breathtaking fire sequences that promised to redefine cinematic spectacle. Every fiber of his being, every waking moment, was dedicated to ensuring Backdraft wasn't just good, but exceptional. He felt the immense pressure, not just from the studio, but from within himself, to prove once again that the kid from Mayberry possessed the vision and tenacity to helm mega-productions. This was his opportunity to solidify his future and to continue providing for his beloved family. It was amidst this whirlwind of professional ambition that the calls from home began to intensify, each one a sharp, discordant note cutting through the carefully orchestrated symphony of his film set. A close family member, grappling with a deeply entrenched and rapidly escalating addiction, was spiraling. The initial concerns had morphed into desperate pleas, then into stark, terrifying warnings from other loved ones about the irreversible damage being wrought. Ron, caught between the roaring inferno of his film and the slow, agonizing burn of a family crisis, found himself in an impossible bind. He heard the urgency in their voices, the raw fear, the plea for intervention, for presence. He knew deep down the severity of the situation demanded immediate, undivided attention, the kind of unwavering support only a few, very close family members could provide. And he was one of them. The choice, when it finally presented itself in stark, agonizing clarity, was not between good and evil, but between two competing, equally compelling imperatives. On one side stood his career, his burgeoning legacy, the hundreds of jobs his film provided, the trust placed in him by a major studio, and the financial stability he was striving to secure for his wife and children. To walk away, even for a crucial period, would have been an act of professional sabotage on a scale almost unthinkable. It would have sent shockwaves through Hollywood, potentially jeopardizing his future projects, damaging his reputation as a reliable and dedicated filmmaker, and perhaps even leading to catastrophic financial losses for the studio. The implicit, and sometimes explicit, pressure from executives was immense. Backdraft needed him. It demanded him. Every minute, every decision, every ounce of his focus. On the other side lay the harrowing reality of his family member's plight, a soul teetering on the precipice, crying out for rescue. The choice was whether to fully immerse himself in the messy, painful, unpredictable process of intervention, of potentially pulling someone back from the brink, or to maintain his professional commitments, trusting that others in the family could manage the crisis, that his financial and professional success would ultimately benefit everyone in the long run. He wrestled with it, sleepless nights consumed by the cacophony of his own thoughts. He pictured the devastated faces of his family, the anguish in their voices. He weighed the ethical implications, the moral burden of prioritizing celluloid over kin, spectacle over salvation. Was he selfish? Was he abandoning his responsibilities? Or was he simply a man trapped, fulfilling a different, equally profound set of duties, believing his continued success was, paradoxically, a form of protection? The decision, agonizingly, was made. He stayed. He poured himself back into Backdraft with a renewed, almost frantic intensity. The cameras kept rolling, the fires blazed on cue, and the film moved closer to its triumphant release. But with every scene shot, every edit approved, a part of Ron Howard felt a profound, chilling emptiness. The roar of the set, the camaraderie of his crew, the excitement of creation, it all felt muted, distant, tinged with a gnawing guilt. The success of Backdraft, when it finally arrived, bringing critical acclaim and box office glory, felt strangely hollow. The cheers, the praise, the accolades, they were background noise to the quiet, internal lament of a choice he had made, a path he had reluctantly walked. He had delivered a masterpiece, but at what personal cost? The questions echoed in the vast, empty spaces of his mind long after the premieres and press tours concluded. This wasn't a wound that healed with time. It was a scar that deepened, becoming an indelible part of his inner landscape. The shadow of 1991 clung to him, manifesting in subtle but significant ways. He became, perhaps, even more private, more guarded, the perfect public smile a protective shield against the turmoil he carried within. The sleepless nights weren't just a consequence of a demanding schedule. They were often punctuated by flashbacks to those desperate phone calls, the images of his suffering family member, the agonizing what-ifs. He wondered, constantly, if his presence then, his direct intervention, might have altered the course of events, might have saved precious time, alleviated immense pain. This regret became a silent, ever-present companion, whispering doubts even in his moments of greatest triumph. The personal repercussions were profound and far-reaching, eroding a piece of his inherent optimism and replacing it with a quiet melancholy. He harbored a self-blame that no amount of external success could assuage. He questioned his own character, his priorities, his moral fortitude. While the world celebrated his talent, he grappled with a deeply personal sense of failure, a feeling that he had, in a critical moment, fallen short of the man he aspired to be. This unspoken burden undoubtedly affected his closest relationships, particularly with his devoted wife Cheryl and his children. While they may not have known the specifics, they would have felt the shift in him, the occasional withdrawal, the intensity behind his gaze that hinted at a deeper, unseen struggle. It was a secret he carried, isolating him, even amidst his family, a constant reminder that even the most outwardly perfect lives harbor hidden battles. The boyish innocence that had defined his early career seemed, to him, to have been irrevocably lost in the moral quagmire of that fateful year. Professionally, the consequences were equally transformative, though perhaps less obvious to the outside world. This devastating choice fueled a relentless drive, an almost insatiable need to achieve, to prove, to compensate. Each subsequent film, each new success, was not just a testament to his skill, but perhaps also an unconscious act of penance, a way to channel the guilt and regret into tangible accomplishment. He became even more meticulous, even more dedicated, pushing himself to the absolute limit, almost as if to justify the sacrifice he had made. The experience may have instilled in him a more nuanced, perhaps even a more cynical, understanding of the cutthroat nature of Hollywood, the demands it places, the personal costs it often exacts. He understood with chilling clarity that the show, indeed, must always go on, even if a part of your soul is left behind in the process. This awareness likely influenced his choice of projects, perhaps leading him to explore themes of resilience, the complexities of family, the quiet heroism of ordinary people, and the sometimes devastating consequences of human decisions. The indelible mark of 1991 wasn't just a fleeting memory. It was a permanent fixture on his conscience, a constant, low-burning ache that never truly extinguished. It was the knowledge that a moment of critical decision made under immense pressure had veered him onto a path of profound regret. It was the understanding that while he had built an empire of cinematic storytelling, a piece of his own story remained untold, burdened by a choice that haunted him. This secret weight, this unseen scar, became a fundamental part of who Ron Howard was, shaping his perspective, coloring his view of success, and ultimately leading him to the confessional moments where he finally revealed the truth about the darkness that hid behind the smile. For decades, the public saw the triumphs, the awards, the consistent excellence. But Ron Howard lived with the quiet echo of 1991, the year a devastating choice left an everlasting shadow on his otherwise luminous life. While Ron Howard's star continued its meteoric ascent, illuminating countless silver screens with his directorial brilliance and captivating millions with his storytelling prowess, a much darker, more insidious shadow was slowly, relentlessly creeping across the hallowed ground of his personal life. It was a shadow cast not by the bright lights of Hollywood premieres, but by the devastating grip of addiction, threatening to consume a beloved member of his inner circle. This wasn't a problem he could solve with a well-crafted script or a perfectly framed shot. This was a battle fought in the quiet desperation of late nights, in hushed telephone calls, and in the agonizing silence of unanswered prayers. The revelation, now shared with an honesty that still reverberates, speaks to a period when Ron Howard, the image of stability and wholesome American success, was internally grappling with a profound crisis that few, if any, outside his immediate family could ever have imagined. He was experiencing the kind of existential dread that success, no matter how immense, could never truly banish. The world saw him basking in the glow of critical acclaim, collecting accolades that cemented his legacy. But behind the polished facade and the ever-present reassuring smile, a raw, lacerating pain was taking root. He recounts the harrowing experience of almost losing a family member to the relentless, destructive force of addiction, a period that coincided precisely with some of his most significant professional triumphs. Imagine the agonizing dichotomy. One moment, he's accepting a prestigious award, delivering a gracious speech to a room full of adoring peers and flashing cameras, the very picture of composure and gratitude. The next, he's back home, or perhaps on a desperate phone call from a hotel room across the country, his heart clenching with terror as he confronts the latest setback in a battle that felt interminable. The joy of professional accomplishment, an emotion that should have been pure and unadulterated, was instead tinged with a corrosive guilt, a gnawing question of whether he was doing enough, whether he was present enough, whether his focus on career was a betrayal of the very people he loved most deeply. This wasn't merely stress, it was a profound, soul-wearying exhaustion, a constant state of hypervigilance that drained him both physically and emotionally. The laughter on set, the camaraderie of filmmaking, the buzz of creative collaboration, all felt strangely muted, distant, almost surreal, against the backdrop of the very real, terrifying struggle unfolding in his private sphere. The devastating impact of addiction on his personal life manifested in countless ways, each more corrosive than the last. It wasn't a sudden, cataclysmic event, but rather a slow, relentless erosion of peace, trust, and predictability. Initially, perhaps there were subtle shifts, missed appointments, unexplained absences, changes in mood or behavior that could be rationalized away, dismissed as stress or a temporary phase. But then came the undeniable signs, the escalating consequences, the broken promises that began to pile up like insurmountable barriers between loved ones. The fear for this family member's safety and well-being became an ever-present hum beneath the surface of his consciousness, a low-level anxiety that never truly dissipated, even in moments of profound professional satisfaction. He describes the emotional toll as a relentless cycle of hope and despair. There would be periods of tentative recovery, fragile victories that would ignite a flicker of optimism, only to be extinguished by yet another relapse, another agonizing descent back into the abyss. Each relapse felt like a punch to the gut, not just for the person struggling with addiction, but for Ron himself, for the entire family unit. The profound sense of helplessness was perhaps the most crushing burden of all. Here was a man accustomed to being in control, to problem-solving, to orchestrating complex narratives and managing vast productions, yet in this most personal and crucial battle, he often felt utterly powerless, watching from the sidelines as the person he loved battled a force that seemed determined to obliterate them. These battles, he revealed, were fought almost entirely behind closed doors, shrouded in a veil of secrecy that was both protective and isolating. For a public figure like Ron Howard, the need to maintain a semblance of normalcy, to shield his loved one from the relentless scrutiny of the media, was paramount. But this secrecy came at a steep cost. It meant that he couldn't openly share his burden, couldn't seek the comfort or counsel of friends and colleagues without the terrifying risk of exposure. The burden of carrying such a secret while simultaneously navigating the demands of a high-profile career amplified the emotional isolation to an almost unbearable degree. He had to compartmentalize his life with a precision that bordered on superhuman. One moment, he's discussing character arcs with an actor, his mind fully engaged in the intricate dance of storytelling. The next, his thoughts are consumed by worry, replaying conversations, analyzing subtle cues, wondering if today would be the day he received the dreaded call. The contrast between the public persona, the affable, unflappable Ron Howard, Hollywood's golden boy, and the private reality of his anguish was stark, a chasm that only he could bridge. Supporting a loved one through such a crisis presented a complex web of challenges, each thread entangled with profound emotional stakes. It forced Ron to confront difficult questions about the nature of love, responsibility, and the perilous line between genuine help and inadvertent enabling. How do you offer unwavering support without becoming complicit in the destructive patterns of addiction? How do you set boundaries with someone you love deeply when those boundaries might lead to pain or even outright rejection? These weren't theoretical questions. They were daily dilemmas fraught with guilt and fear. Interventions were considered, planned, and sometimes executed, often with the guidance of professionals. But even these structured attempts at help were emotionally draining, tearing at the fabric of family bonds even as they sought to mend them. The process of finding the right treatment, navigating the bewildering landscape of rehabilitation centers, therapists, and support groups became a second full-time job. There were meetings with counselors, late-night research sessions, telephone calls filled with medical jargon and frustrating bureaucracy. Each decision felt monumental, each failure devastating, each flicker of progress a fragile, precious gift. The family atmosphere was often tense, overshadowed by the unspoken anxiety, a constant state of walking on eggshells, afraid that one wrong word or action might trigger a relapse. And all of this was unfolding as Ron Howard was reaching new pinnacles in his professional life. The irony was brutal, almost unbearable. While he was celebrating box office successes, winning awards that solidified his place among Hollywood's elite directors, his private world was perpetually teetering on the brink. Imagine delivering an acceptance speech, heart swelling with gratitude for the recognition, while simultaneously battling the urge to check his phone for updates from home, his mind racing with images of a loved one teetering on the precipice. The public perception of his life was one of seamless triumph, an almost idyllic existence for the Mayberry kid who made good. But the reality was far more nuanced, far more painful. He was a man deeply acquainted with profound internal turmoil, his outward calm a testament to a strength he often felt was rapidly depleting. The pressure to perform, to maintain that veneer of perfection, added yet another layer to his burden. He couldn't afford to break down, couldn't reveal the cracks in his armor, not when so many livelihoods depended on his unwavering leadership, not when the media was constantly watching. The fear of what public exposure of this private struggle might do, not just to his career, but more importantly, to the already fragile state of his family member, was a constant companion, a heavy weight that settled on his shoulders and refused to budge. This harrowing period fundamentally reshaped Ron Howard's understanding of resilience, vulnerability, and the true meaning of success. It forced him to confront the limits of his control, to accept that some battles, no matter how fiercely fought, require surrender to a process larger than himself. The lessons learned through this crucible of pain were invaluable, though earned at an unimaginable cost. He learned the profound importance of self-care, even when it felt impossible, and the absolute necessity of leaning on the true strength of family bonds, even when those bonds felt stretched to their breaking point. While the specific details of this family member's journey towards recovery remain, understandably, a private matter, Ron's willingness to reveal this profound vulnerability, to pull back the curtain on a struggle so deeply personal, speaks volumes about the enduring impact of that time. It underscores the universal truth that even those who appear to have it all, who radiate success and unwavering confidence, carry unseen burdens, fight silent battles, and confront their own very human frailties behind the impenetrable facade of their public lives. It reminds us that empathy, compassion, and understanding are perhaps the most valuable currencies, especially when faced with the hidden suffering that so many bravely endure. The experience, he implies, ultimately brought a deeper understanding of the fragility of life and the immense, enduring strength required to navigate its most treacherous waters, forever altering his perspective on what truly matters. For 50 long, arduous years, Ron Howard had cultivated an image of unwavering strength and unshakable resilience that seemed almost superhuman. He was the perpetual motion machine of Hollywood, a man who had seamlessly transitioned from beloved child star to accomplished director, building an empire on the bedrock of tireless work and an unwavering commitment to his craft. But behind the steady gaze and the reassuring smile, a tempest was brewing, a relentless storm of expectation and self-imposed pressure that threatened to consume him whole. The industry demands were monumental, the artistic visions he pursued ever more ambitious, and the lines between work and life had long since blurred into an indistinct, exhausting haze. He was, in essence, running on fumes. A high-octane engine pushed far beyond its designed limits, and the subtle, insidious symptoms of burnout had been manifesting themselves for months, if not years, ignored and brushed aside with the same determined optimism that had defined his entire career. He'd started noticing the tremors first, a slight, almost imperceptible trembling in his hands after particularly grueling 18-hour days, followed by a persistent dull ache behind his eyes that no amount of sleep seemed to alleviate. Sleep itself had become a luxury, snatched in fragmented, restless hours, often interrupted by the frantic mental rehearsals of upcoming scenes or the thorny problem-solving required to bring a complex narrative to life. His famed enthusiasm, once a boundless wellspring of energy that inspired entire crews, began to wane, replaced by a brittle irritability that he struggled to mask. The sharp, incisive clarity of thought that had made him such an effective leader felt increasingly dulled, shrouded in a persistent mental fog that made even simple decisions feel like monumental hurdles. He found himself forgetting minor details, misplacing notes, and struggling to retrieve specific words during script meetings, small, disquieting cracks in the seemingly impenetrable facade of his professional competence. The physical toll was even more alarming, though he'd attributed most of it to the natural rigors of his demanding schedule. Constant fatigue clung to him like a suffocating blanket, making every movement feel like an uphill battle. He'd developed a nervous tic, a subtle clenching of his jaw, and a tightness in his shoulders that never truly relaxed, even when he tried to force himself into moments of downtime. Headaches, once a rarity, had become a daily companion, a throbbing testament to the relentless mental strain he was under. He'd lost weight, his already lean frame becoming gaunt, and the once vibrant spark in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by a weary hollow. Friends and family had voiced their concerns, gently suggesting he slow down, take a break, but Ron, ever the perfectionist, ever the man who believed he could conquer any challenge with sheer willpower, had waved them off, dismissing their worries as overreactions. He was Ron Howard, the golden boy, the one who always delivered, and the show, he believed, simply had to go on, no matter the personal cost. He couldn't afford to be seen as anything less than perfect, anything less than entirely in control. The notion of vulnerability, of admitting a limit, was anathema to the image he had meticulously cultivated, and, perhaps, even to the man he had become. The day it happened began like countless others, under the harsh, unforgiving glare of studio lights, the air thick with the scent of sawdust, stale coffee, and the electric hum of countless pieces of equipment. They were deep into production on a particularly ambitious sequence, a critical turning point in the film that required an extraordinary level of precision and intricate coordination. The schedule was already impossibly tight, every minute accounted for, every delay a catastrophic ripple effect on the astronomical budget. Ron had been on his feet for what felt like an eternity, directing camera movements, blocking actors, fine-tuning dialogue, his voice a steady, calm presence even as his internal world churned with a frantic energy. He'd skipped breakfast entirely, surviving on lukewarm coffee and the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Lunch was a fleeting, almost forgotten sandwich eaten standing up while reviewing dailies, his mind already racing ahead to the next challenge. Mid-afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent outside, casting long, distorted shadows across the set, Ron was deep in conversation with his cinematographer, meticulously explaining the subtle emotional beats he wanted to capture in a complex tracking shot. He felt a sudden, profound wave of dizziness wash over him, a disorienting lurch that made the sturdy concrete floor beneath his feet seem to tilt precariously. He blinked, trying to clear the sudden blurriness in his vision, but it persisted, like a shimmering heat haze distorting the world around him. A cold sweat broke out on his brow, trickling down his temples, even as an internal heat flared, making his skin prickle uncomfortably. He felt a peculiar lightness in his head, an unsettling sensation of detachment, as if his mind was floating free of his body, observing the scene from a distance. The hushed chatter of the crew, the distant clatter of props, the rhythmic whirring of the cameras, it all seemed to recede, becoming a muffled, distorted symphony. He tried to steady himself, reaching out a hand, perhaps for the shoulder of his cinematographer, or perhaps just for the solid, reassuring presence of a nearby light stand. But his limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, like leaden weights. A sharp, searing pain exploded behind his eyes, a blinding white flash that momentarily blotted out all other sensations. His knees buckled unexpectedly, giving way beneath him with a sudden, shocking weakness. His breath caught in his throat, a strangled gasp escaping his lips as his world began to spin uncontrollably. The meticulously constructed set, the faces of his dedicated crew, the bright artificial lights, they all swirled into an indistinguishable vortex of color and shadow. He felt himself falling, a terrifying, helpless sensation of gravity pulling him down, down, down. There was a brief, agonizing moment of impact as his body hit the floor, a dull thud that seemed to echo through the sudden, stunned silence that had fallen over the set. Then, mercifully, there was only darkness, a complete, engulfing blackness that offered a terrifying yet strangely peaceful reprieve from the relentless demands of his waking life. The world slowly, painstakingly filtered back into Ron's consciousness, not as a coherent whole, but as a jumble of disjointed sensations. First, the muffled murmur of voices, urgent and laced with concern. Then, the distinct, metallic tang of ammonia, sharp and startling, assaulting his nostrils. A cool, damp cloth pressed against his forehead offered a small measure of comfort, cutting through the residual haze. He tried to open his eyes, but his eyelids felt impossibly heavy, glued shut by an invisible force. A deep, aching throb pulsed behind his temples, a constant, dull reminder of the sudden, violent intrusion into his carefully controlled existence. When his eyes finally fluttered open, it was to a blurred mosaic of worried faces hovering above him, their expressions a mixture of fear, shock, and genuine affection. His production designer, his first assistant director, his longtime camera operator, all looked down at him with an intensity that pierced through his grogginess. He was lying on a makeshift cot, a blanket hastily thrown over him, in what appeared to be the quiet corner of a production office that had been swiftly transformed into a temporary infirmary. The harsh studio lights had been dimmed, replaced by a softer, more sympathetic glow. A brisk, efficient-looking paramedic was checking his pulse, her touch surprisingly gentle, her gaze reassuringly calm. "Mr. Howard, can you hear me? Do you know where you are?" Her voice was clear, cutting through the lingering fog in his mind. Ron swallowed, his throat dry and scratchy. Yeah, I think so. On set, right?" He tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea instantly pulled him back down. The paramedic gently placed a hand on his shoulder, urging him to remain still. "You're on set, yes. You collapsed a few minutes ago. We're just checking you over. You've had quite a scare." She paused, her eyes scanning his face. "Dehydration, severe exhaustion. Your blood pressure was quite low, and you're running on empty, Mr. Howard. Completely on empty. You pushed yourself too hard." Her words, delivered with a professional detachment, nonetheless landed with the weight of a physical blow. "Pushed myself too hard." The phrase echoed in his mind, stripping away the carefully constructed illusion of his own invincibility. It wasn't a vague feeling of being tired, a minor inconvenience to be powered through. This was a physical manifestation, an undeniable breakdown. His body, the vessel he had so ruthlessly driven for decades, had finally rebelled, throwing up its hands in a desperate plea for respite. The realization hit him with a cold, stark clarity. He was not a machine. He was flesh and blood, fallible and fragile. A profound sense of fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the lingering confusion. Not just fear for his physical well-being, but a deeper, more existential dread. What if this had been worse? What if he hadn't just collapsed, but truly broken something, mentally or physically? The meticulous plans for the film, the schedules, the hundreds of people who depended on his leadership, it all felt incredibly precarious, balanced on the precipice of his own exhaustion. The sheer vulnerability of that moment, lying there helpless, stripped bare of his usual authority and control, was a revelation. It shattered the comfortable narrative he had told himself for so long, the one where Ron Howard was always the one holding it all together, the unflappable captain steering the ship through any storm. His first assistant director, a man who had weathered countless productions by his side, leaned closer, his voice low and compassionate. "Ron, we've paused production. Everyone's fine. We're just waiting for you to get checked out properly. No rush. The crew is worried about you, but they understand. Take your time." The concern in his colleague's eyes was genuine, and it stung. To be the cause of such disruption, to be the one who had momentarily brought everything to a grinding halt, felt like a personal failure. The perfectionist in him recoiled. But beneath that sting was a flicker of something else, something quieter and more profound, a nascent understanding. He looked around the quiet office, away from the demanding glare of the set, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to truly feel the bone-deep weariness that permeated his entire being. It wasn't just physical fatigue, it was mental, emotional, spiritual. He felt hollowed out, drained, a husk of the man he usually presented to the world. The immediate aftermath was a blur of medical advice, hushed conversations, and an overwhelming desire to simply disappear. He was told unequivocally that he needed rest, real rest, not the fragmented hours he'd been snatching. He needed to step away completely. The thought of it, even in his weakened state, sent a jolt of anxiety through him. How could he? The film, the schedule, the momentum. But then he remembered the darkness, the fall, the helplessness, and a chilling realization dawned. He had to. This wasn't a choice anymore. It was a mandate from his own body, a stark, undeniable warning sign that he had pushed himself to the absolute precipice. This moment, this humiliating and terrifying collapse, was the universe's way of forcing him to confront the inconvenient, uncomfortable truth about his own limits, a truth he had diligently ignored for far too long. The road ahead, he knew, would require a profound reevaluation of everything he thought he knew about himself and his career. But for now, the immediate task was simply to breathe, to recover, and to begin to piece together the shattered fragments of his seemingly perfect, yet utterly exhausted existence. The quiet whispers of what truly happened during those missing hours on set, when his body finally gave out, would forever etch themselves into his memory, a stark and devastating reminder of the immense price of unrelenting pressure. The lights of the soundstage, usually a comforting glow, suddenly warped into a blinding, oppressive glare. Ron remembered the exact moment, the sudden, inexplicable shift from a perfectly normal day of directing to a world consumed by dizzying chaos. He was mid-sentence, giving notes to a camera operator, when a wave of nausea, unlike anything he had ever experienced, washed over him. His vision blurred, the concrete floor seemed to tilt violently, and a sharp, agonizing pain erupted behind his eyes, quickly followed by a crushing tightness in his chest. One moment he was the picture of composed professionalism, the next his knees buckled without warning, and the world went dark. He awoke to hushed voices, the clinical smell of antiseptic, and the insistent beeping of machines. The sterile white of a hospital room replaced the familiar hustle of the set. Confusion warred with a deep, bone-whirling fatigue that permeated every fiber of his being. He tried to speak, but his throat felt dry and constricted. A doctor, looking grim, explained that he had suffered a severe, stress-induced collapse. Not a heart attack, thankfully, but a complete systemic shutdown. His body, pushed beyond its limits for decades, had finally, violently rebelled. He was told he needed to stop, completely, immediately. He, Ron Howard, the man who had never stopped, now had no choice but to cease. The decision was made quickly and quietly. No public statement, no press releases, no headlines blaring, "Ron Howard collapses." The media, always hungry for any hint of celebrity frailty, would have feasted on it. But this was different. This wasn't a scandal or a creative disagreement. It was a profound, deeply personal crisis. His team, fiercely loyal, rallied to create a fortress of secrecy around him. The official story was a scheduled break, a much-needed hiatus after a strenuous production. But behind closed doors, Ron was facing a terrifying, unfamiliar reality. He was utterly broken. The man who had been the embodiment of the all-American success story, the eternal optimist, was now confined, helpless, to a bed, grappling with a body that refused to obey. The first few weeks were a blur of frustration and denial. He chafed against the enforced idleness, the constant monitoring, the relentless parade of specialists. He had always been a doer, a creator, a problem solver. To be reduced to a patient, to have his schedule dictated by rest and medication, felt like a profound betrayal of his very identity. He watched the news, saw the world moving on without him, and a deep, unfamiliar sense of panic began to set in. Was this it? Was his career over? Had he pushed too hard, not just in that final project, but throughout his entire life, paying a devastating price for every success, every award, every film? The quiet of his recovery room became a cacophony of self-doubt and agonizing retrospection. The doctors had been emphatic. This wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was a profound burnout that had manifested physically, a complete depletion of his mental and emotional reserves. They spoke of adrenal fatigue, of a nervous system stretched to breaking point, of the cumulative toll of decades spent under immense pressure. They explained that his relentless drive, his unwavering commitment, while admirable, had also been his undoing. He had pushed away sleep, ignored warning signs, dismissed every tremor of doubt or fatigue as mere weakness. He had believed himself invincible, a testament to the sheer force of his will. But the body, they reminded him, always has the final say. Those missing months became a crucible. Stripped of the daily grind, the constant demands of his profession, the public scrutiny, Ron was forced to confront the true landscape of his inner world. For the first time in what felt like forever, he had nothing to do but think. And what he thought about, initially, was everything he had desperately avoided. The weight of the devastating choice he made in 1991, a decision shrouded in professional ambition that had ripple effects he was only now truly appreciating, came flooding back. He replayed conversations, reconsidered motivations, and felt the bitter tang of regret. He saw how that earlier decision, driven by a desire to secure his place in Hollywood, had subtly shifted his perspective, pushing him further into an unsustainable work ethic. Then there was the specter of his family, the quiet desperation of almost losing a family member to addiction, a battle that had unfolded largely behind the scenes, away from the glittering lights of premieres and award ceremonies, now took on a new, sharper focus. While he was basking in critical acclaim, while he was celebrated for his cinematic achievements, a profound suffering was unfolding much closer to home. He had been present, yes, offering support and love, but he also acknowledged with a painful honesty how his own consuming schedule had often meant he was physically there, but perhaps emotionally distant, perpetually distracted by the demands of his craft. The guilt of that realization was a heavy burden to bear. Recovery was not a linear path. There were days of crushing despair, where the thought of ever returning to a set, let alone creating something new, felt utterly impossible. He had to learn to eat differently, to sleep differently, to simply be differently. Meditation, something he had always dismissed as frivolous, became a quiet anchor. He spent hours walking in nature, rediscovering the simple rhythm of his own breathing, the subtle beauty of the world beyond the four walls of a soundstage. He spent books that had nothing to do with filmmaking, listened to music that wasn't a potential score, and slowly, painstakingly, began to rebuild his connection to himself. He spoke to therapists, openly and honestly, about the perfectionism that had driven him, the fear of failure that had fueled his relentless pace, and the deep-seated need for approval that had masked so much of his true self. He realized that the image of the perfect Ron Howard, the genial, unflappable director, was a carefully constructed facade, one he had been unknowingly maintaining at an unsustainable cost. The missing months were not just a period of physical healing, but a profound spiritual and emotional excavation. He began to understand that true strength wasn't about never faltering, but about the courage to acknowledge one's limits, to seek help, and to embrace vulnerability. When he finally emerged from that period of forced seclusion, Ron Howard was a changed man. Not outwardly, perhaps. The genial smile, the earnest eyes remained, but beneath the surface, a fundamental shift had occurred. He carried with him the quiet wisdom born of profound struggle. He understood, in a way he never had before, the true fragility of life, the interconnectedness of body and mind, and the absolute necessity of prioritizing well-being above all else. He learned that the greatest stories weren't just found on screen, but within the hidden battles of the human heart, battles fought in silence, far from the public eye. Those missing months were, in essence, a rebirth, a devastating but ultimately transformative experience that reshaped not just his career, but the very core of who he was as a man. He had faced his demons, acknowledged his flaws, and found a different, more authentic kind of strength. What Ron Howard's extraordinary revelations truly lay bare is not just a glimpse into the private anguish of one man, but a stark, often uncomfortable reflection on the true cost of the American dream itself. For decades, he stood as an emblem of wholesome success, the all-American boy who seamlessly transitioned from child star to acclaimed director, seemingly untouched by the usual Hollywood pitfalls. His career trajectory was, by all outward appearances, a meticulously crafted masterpiece of perfection. He was Andy Griffith's innocent son, Richie Cunningham, a figure synonymous with integrity and a gentle, unwavering smile. But as his recent confessions powerfully demonstrate, that picture-perfect image, while inspiring to millions, often demanded a profound and deeply personal sacrifice. The immense pressure to maintain such an immaculate public persona is something few of us can truly comprehend. Imagine living under a constant, microscopic lens, where every decision, every misstep, every moment of human vulnerability could be scrutinized, judged, and potentially shatter an entire narrative built over half a century. For someone like Ron Howard, who embodies the aspirational ideal of wholesome ambition, the expectation of flawlessness must have been crushing. How do you reconcile the public's perception of you as an unflappable paragon of virtue with the very real, often messy struggles that define the human experience? It forces an almost impossible balancing act, where authenticity is often sacrificed on the altar of public expectation. Success, particularly at the stratospheric level Ron Howard achieved, often comes with an unseen yet devastating price tag. We celebrate the accolades, the box office records, the iconic films, but rarely do we acknowledge the personal tolls exacted along the way. His devastating choice in 1991, the agonizing struggle with a family member's addiction while he was seemingly on top of the world, or the moment his own body gave out on set are not isolated incidents. They are poignant reminders of the unseen battles fought behind closed doors, away from the glittering spotlights and celebratory headlines. These moments reveal that even the most celebrated figures, those we perceive as having it all, grapple with profound difficulties, anxieties, and heartaches that pierce through the illusion of their seemingly impenetrable lives. This candidness from a figure like Ron Howard shatters the carefully constructed facade that often accompanies fame. It serves as a powerful testament to the universal truth that no amount of success, wealth, or public adoration can insulate an individual from the intrinsic struggles of the human condition. The need for authenticity, the pain of personal sacrifice, the constant battle between public expectation and private reality, these are not unique to Hollywood royalty. They are amplified versions of the same challenges we all face, whether in our careers, our families, or our personal journeys. His story urges us to look beyond the surface, to recognize the shared humanity in every narrative, and to understand that beneath every smile, every award, and every meticulously crafted public image lies a complex individual wrestling with their own unique set of burdens and triumphs. It is a humbling reminder that perfection is an illusion, and true strength often lies in the courage to reveal our vulnerabilities. And so, as the dust settles on Ron Howard's recent and remarkably candid revelations, we are left with a new, more profound understanding, not just of a beloved public figure, but of the human condition itself. What began as an interview about a new chapter in his life quickly evolved into a sweeping confessional, laying bare the profound personal cost of maintaining a public facade, even one rooted in innocence and integrity. His willingness to pull back the curtain on decades of quiet struggles, the agonizing choices, and the silent battles fought away from the glare of the spotlight has irrevocably reshaped how we perceive a man many thought they knew entirely. This courage to be vulnerable, to expose the cracks in the seemingly perfect veneer of Hollywood success, does not diminish Ron Howard's legacy. On the contrary, it enriches it immeasurably. For over half a century, he embodied the quintessential all-American boy, the wholesome face of Mayberry and Richie Cunningham, a persona so deeply ingrained in our collective consciousness that it felt almost sacrilegious to imagine any darkness lurking beneath. Yet, by sharing the burden of his 1991 decision, the near loss of a family member to addiction, and his own physical collapse under immense pressure, he transforms from a two-dimensional icon into a multifaceted, complex, and deeply relatable human being. His story becomes a testament to resilience, not just in the face of professional challenges, but in navigating the intricate, often painful landscape of personal life. In this act of radical honesty, Ron Howard fosters an invaluable sense of authenticity. In an era saturated with curated realities and filtered lives, his raw transparency serves as a powerful antidote. It grants permission not just to those in the public eye, but to everyone to acknowledge their imperfections, their regrets, and their ongoing struggles. It underscores a crucial truth that even the most accomplished and admired among us carry hidden wounds, make difficult choices with imperfect information, and grapple with the heavy weight of their past. This openness helps to dismantle the pervasive myth of effortless perfection, reminding us that genuine strength often lies in the courage to admit weakness. Furthermore, his confessions cultivate a deeper, more profound empathy from his audience. It is one thing to admire someone's talent and achievements, it is another entirely to connect with their pain and shared humanity. When Ron Howard speaks of the devastating choice he made, the fear of losing a loved one to addiction, or the moment his body simply gave out, he ceases to be merely a celebrated director or actor. He becomes a fellow traveler on life's tumultuous journey, someone who has faced profound challenges and navigated the often unforgiving currents of personal responsibility and emotional toll. This shared vulnerability forges a bond far stronger than mere admiration, moving us towards understanding, compassion, and a recognition of our common human experience. Ultimately, Ron Howard's decision to share these intimate details serves as a vital reminder of the critical importance of mental and emotional well-being. His narrative powerfully illustrates that success, accolades, and public adoration offer no immunity from internal strife. It takes immense courage to confront one's past, to acknowledge the weight of unspoken burdens, and to dismantle a lifetime of carefully constructed stoicism. His journey speaks volumes about the liberation that comes with living an honest, unvarnished life, even if that honesty reveals flaws and regrets. It encourages us all to reflect on our own unseen battles, to extend grace to ourselves and to others, and to understand that true strength often manifests not in the absence of struggle, but in the brave and often solitary act of facing it head-on. Ron Howard's new chapter is not just about revealing darkness, but about stepping into the light of a truer, more authentic self.